heard you mentioning off air that you need to strengthen your lower back. Well, maybe the first movement, some type of deadlift. We do like a deficit deadlift. That's just like an extra range of motion deadlift. Okay, let's figure out a movement that's going to also probably address the lower back. Maybe we have you do some sumo deficit deadlifts as well, just to get you to train from like a funky position. And then maybe there's some like 45-degree back raises. Okay, now we need like a hamstring movement in there. Let's maybe finish off with some abs or something like that, and the workout's over.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Morning, Bear.
Did you get a pump in this morning?
I got one in.
There we go. All right, I'm going after this, so I'm refraining from drinking my pre-workout during the podcast, though, because I think that could go sideways. So I'm behaving for now. But speaking of strength training, today's guest is Mark Bell. He founded Slingshot. A lot of you are probably familiar with that company, but a company that creates supportive gear for weightlifting, powerlifting, and CrossFit, as well as the Within You supplement brand. He also runs 2 YouTube channels, Mark Bell Super Training Gym and the Mark Bell Power Project. In addition to all of his business ventures, Mark is a record-holding professional powerlifter, currently ranked among the top 10 all-time powerlifters with a total of 2,628 pounds. And for those of you fellow meatheads who are listening, squat was 1080, deadlift 766, bench 854, which is just wild. Also, he happens to have just run a marathon fairly recently, so he pivoted from that and runs a podcast, among many other things. But Mark, hopefully I didn't butcher that intro or that bio, but welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Hey, I wanted to congratulate you guys on being able to use ChatGPT to look up people.
Is that the ChatGPT intro?
I have no idea. I'm just talking shit.
I was gonna say, otherwise we're gonna get with our production company and I'm gonna make them do some push-ups. But Mark, obviously there's a lot of ways we can go with this conversation, and super intrigued by your background. But I guess just to kind of kick things off, obviously you cut your teeth in the powerlifting world, and you've kind of pivoted and expanded to many other things. So could you just kind of frame up that journey for us? I know you just recently ran a marathon, so at one point you were walking around 330 pounds, moving big weight, and then you decided to go run a marathon. You've launched businesses. You've achieved success in quite a few different areas, and I think that's kind of what I want to eventually extract to this podcast is kind of what's the common thread there. But walk us through the journey a little bit, if you don't mind.
The common thread is always the same thing that you always hear from everybody. It's consistency. And then if you figure out a way to be consistent with something, a lot of times that means that you most likely have to really enjoy something to be consistent with it for a long time. So I find it interesting because people try to, have all these different recipes on how to get great or how to get good at something. But probably the thing that reigns supreme over everything else is whether you like it or not. If you like it and enjoy it, then maybe it won't seem, because you hear some people talk about like the torture of exercise and how you have to go in there and have this, crazy mindset and all these different things, and how you have to kind of hate yourself or hate the workout. And I get some of that. I've lifted angry before, and I totally understand all that. But really, truly, if you really just love it, then you tend to want to embrace it. And then you embrace all the things that are kind of wrapped into that, including something like recovery, so people, they'll also overtrain. They won't eat properly, but yet they're saying that they're all in. And really, what I've found is that people just really aren't. And I think through powerlifting, running, and probably bodybuilding almost more so than anything else, which I only did one bodybuilding show, but it left a pretty good print on me. Bodybuilding made me recognize that I was only about 60% in on everything else I was doing, which at that time I was already a multimillionaire with the businesses and already accomplished powerlifter. But bodybuilding is a full court press. It's 24/7 when you're prepping for a bodybuilding show. So I found that challenge of doing a bodybuilding show was probably one of the hardest things I ever did, just because there was nothing actually difficult about it. The training wasn't hard. the tanning and and the meal prep and all that stuff. None of it was actually hard. It's all stuff that I'm familiar with. But to do it every day, day in and day out, have the 6 meals, do your lifting, do your cardio, and just somehow figure out a way to be out in front all the time feels like a nearly impossible task when it comes to something like bodybuilding. But yeah, I basically have just started lifting when I was really young. Story's probably very similar to many other people. Started lifting when I was about 12 or 13, and we had weights in our basement, and I was able to. I guess I learned powerlifting kind of right off the bat without really even knowing it. I learned about like 5x5s and a bunch of stuff like that. And so I trained just a little bit. I did some bench pressing in our basement. And then one day I had some of my friends come over, was showing them the weights and stuff. And then I realized like they couldn't lift, they couldn't really lift the bar without, squirming all over the place and all that stuff. And I was able to do it with 25s on each side. And so from the time I was very young, I've just felt like I think that this could probably turn into something special because I seem to be, just for whatever reason, just maybe wired for it a little differently than everybody else. And then it wasn't too long after that. It was probably a year or two later where I bench pressed like 240 pounds and I was like 14 or something like that. And my cousin was freaked out by that. He was just like, that doesn't make any sense that you're that strong at that age. And he was like, that'll probably turn into something. He's like, I don't know what you could do with bench pressing, but he goes, who knows?
Yeah, I think, looking back, I think my dad finally started let me lift weights. I think it was 8th grade. I finally got the nod. And, once you kind of start seeing the changes happen, it's pretty cool. How important do you think it is for particularly in this case, I'm going to speak to kind of young men, to start weightlifting, obviously for the physical benefits, but for me, that's finally when I started getting a little bit of confidence, right? It's a very awkward period for a 14-year-old kid, and you've got zits on your face and your voice is cracking and your hormones are all jacked up. But I think that's a great way for young men to start getting confidence, a little bit of swagger if you're walking around the hallways and you're bigger than everyone else. So did you experience that? And what are your thoughts on that for our youth?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to grow up any other way. I wasn't like a skinny nerd or anything like that. I wasn't anybody that was about to get beat up by anybody. I was pretty big, and then also I had 2 older brothers that went through the same school, and my oldest brother was like the town badass. So I never really had my perspective of everything is probably a little different than what other people may have experienced. And even like having friends and stuff like that was just pretty easy again because my brothers were likable people and they went through the school already. Um, so I didn't have to like work for a lot of that stuff. I think it's worth mentioning and worth bringing up. I also have, grew up with 2 great parents, and my parents, they just sort of gifted me confidence in a way. I think just maybe the way they nurtured me or the way they loved me, or I don't really know all the different components that go into all that, but they were really big on like just sort of turning yourself into something. You got to like make yourself into something, and so they exposed all of us to different types of sports, and whatever my parents saw that we were interested in, they would uh, they would back that up quite a bit. And it didn't matter if it wasn't even a sport, because my brother Chris, he's 5'6", he has a different frame than me, and he grew up unfortunately with like a lot of chronic pain, and still to this day has a lot of pain. But he wanted to be a filmmaker, and he had different desires. So my parents backed that up, and a lot of people have seen some of the documentaries that he's made. He's made Bigger, Stronger, Faster, and Prescription Thugs, and a bunch of other movies. Working on a movie right now, actually. But yeah, my parents were huge in the kind of cultivating of that. And then I do think it's super important for young men to like really like build themselves up. I guess like when I was lifting, I didn't really know what it was all about. I thought I was building like the exterior, but I didn't really realize I was really building an interior that The reason why that's so important is that this world can chew you up and spit you out, and especially for young guys, when you run into like your first love or your second, a girlfriend or whatever it might be, like those things can really mess with people. I mean, I know many friends that, between the ages of like 16 and 19 just got really just torn to pieces with relationships. And I felt so good with myself that I never dealt with that. I was never really worried or concerned about what other people said, or wasn't really super tied up in a lot of stuff like that, because I felt like it's kind of easier to say those things when you feel substantial. It's kind of the same thing with finances. If you there's people are going to have a way different perspective if they make $40,000 a year than if they make $4 million a year. And same thing with your physical prowess. I view fitness as like fitness. People talk about having financial freedom. I think fitness freedom, strength freedom is really important. Just the freedom to know that, like, if someone's going to try to, hurt you or harm you or beat the shit out of you, that that's going to be a tough task for them. Maybe they could still do something to you, but you're a little harder to kill, I guess you'd say.
Absolutely.
Mark, how has your, like, as you've gone through different evolutions of your kind of both fitness journey and then from an entrepreneurial and just business aspect of it too, how has your kind of why, it's actually a thread that we pull out often with guests on here, is kind of the why behind high achievers. And to preface that, like, a lot of times we find that over time that why changes. And you even said something earlier of like, yeah, I've lifted angry. I've been angry before, but it doesn't sound like that's been your main source of fuel. So can you talk a little bit about how, like, was that more a source of fuel when you were younger, and how has that evolved over time, or what has been your source?
When you're young, you're full of piss and vinegar, and maybe like having a chip on your shoulder might be something that's really important, actually, because again, we got to go back to the most important thing. The most important thing is consistency. And so, for me, when I was growing up, I was in special classes and stuff like that. They sort of didn't know what was wrong with me from like a learning perspective. I think really ultimately I was just disinterested, just didn't care. And I think I recognized that school wasn't going to really matter that much for me. And so I sort of checked out at a young age, but I did buy the story that I was dumb, that I was stupid, and that I couldn't learn the same way as other kids. And so when you kind of face something like that, then you're like, well, I should find something that I'm good at, And I remember having conversations with my mother. My mother's like, I was really upset. I was like doing homework or something. It was just taking me forever. And my mom's like, when you go and run a race, like, who wins? When you arm wrestle your friends, who wins? When you lift against your friend, stuff like that. She's like, you got your own unique talents. They have their own unique talents. And, you just try to do the best with the talents that you have here. The why on stuff changes drastically because everything else around you changes so drastically. When I was young and I was, coming up, especially like in powerlifting, you don't really have a name. Like, no one knows who you are at the moment. And, I at one point I made a list. I made a hit list, and even some of my friends were on the hit list. And they'd be like, bro, what's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? But it was just me trying to, I wanted to make myself better. And that was kind of a fun way for me to make myself better. If I'm better than him and I'm better than him, then I'm making myself better, and I tried not to get too caught up in what they were doing, but it did present like a cool challenge, especially when I'd work out with certain people. The problem is, after a while, I wanted to be stronger than everybody that I knew, and I started to know more and more people, and so it got to be way harder. But my best friend Jesse Burdick, we would lift together. We would be doing some squats back and forth, and I just remember watching him squat, and I'm like, I hope he blows his knee out. you know, just so I like have an advantage over him, you know, rather than me thinking like I should just work on myself and get better. I'm just like, I hope he dies, you know, in this workout. And then he and I like we told each other that like years later. He's like, dude, I was thinking the same thing. He's like, actually, I wanted to just take a 2x4 to the back of your head, like while you were squatting, because we would keep going back and forth, and neither one of us would really give up or give in. And so, you know, having and the why back then was just to try to get as big, as strong as possible. And I don't really know if there was that much attention to why, other than like, I just want to see what the hell happens when I just get really strong and kind of go from there. And I think one of the quotes that I really love is you're sacrificing for the unknown, you know, or maybe it's more like a mantra than a quote, but you're sacrificing for the unknown. You don't know, and sacrifice is a pretty strong word, but you don't really know what you're sacrificing for. You don't know why you want to squat 700 pounds or 800 pounds. And you don't have no idea why, when you squat 900 pounds, that the next conversation is about 1,000. And when you squat 1,000 pounds, why the next conversation is about 1,100. Like, it's just a kind of an ongoing thing. It's never ending. But I do think that whatever the reason why that you're lifting for, I think it's good to really lean into that. So even if you are lifting angry, even if you're lifting because you're upset from something that happened at school or a relationship, or your finances suck, whatever all those cases might be, those are all actually, I think, fairly healthy things to lean into, as long as it's not to your detriment. And that's where you get, you know, the kind of this double-edged sword effect of training, is that you want to do it to the best of your ability, and you want to really optimize stuff. You want things to be optimal. And this is really missed in fitness and in strength and conditioning and stuff, is that people are thinking of maximal weights and they're not thinking of optimal weights. And just because someone hears that, or they see someone on the internet that deadlifts 700 pounds, they're not really paying attention. They're not really watching. The guy that did 700, he also probably, you know, he did it for like 3 reps, and then he just like dropped the weight at the end, and it didn't even look that hard for him, you know. And that's the thing that people miss. It's like the way that registers on your body. It's like, usually it's way too much, but the lifters that are smart, they don't really tangle with the 95%. They don't really tangle with the 100%, unless they really have to, unless they're in a competitive scenario. They're not gonna. You hear people say, leave it all in the gym, you know. And I think that I understand the mentality. I get it. Again, when I was 15 and 17 and stuff, I did a lot of stuff like that. But I learned over the years that lifting and strength is a skill set. Plain and simple, it's a skill set. And we see this with fighting. I think jiu-jitsu has really opened up a lot of people's eyes, because we know that a guy can be, you know, 180 and he can just completely destroy someone that's 250 if the guy that's lighter is skilled. And lifting is a skill set. It doesn't necessarily require you to smack the chalk bowl and smack yourself in the face and headbutt the barbell. But at the same time, you got to kind of do what you got to do to keep yourself fired up and keep yourself motivated to get it through the workouts.
As somebody who has been kind of unafraid to push the limits, I mean, especially when you were 330 kind of with a 2,600 total, would you still, like, say you have somebody who's 25, or even just yourself in life? I'd love to see if you still view it the same way, of like, when you set a goal, so you said, I just wanted to be as big and strong as possible. When you push into that and you get to the edge of, or like you're in the belly of that beast, and you realize kind of maybe some negative side effects that are stemming from that, when you look at maybe even family, life, like outside of that, would you still say the takeaways and learnings that you get when you push so deep into something are worth those negative things? Or would you say, there's a wiser way to do it where you can still push it without having to negatively affect other aspects of your life?
Yeah, for me, I made the decision that those things are totally worth it. You know, and you get into the category of like performance enhancing drugs and things like that. And people are like, man, why would you mess with that stuff? That seems super dangerous, or just adds another element of danger to the already heavy lifts and the already heavy body weight. But Yeah, I just feel like we're not really here for that long, and you just got to make the best choice that you can on what you think is best for you. And then once you think that you figured out what's best for you, then you just go for it with everything that you got. I do think that that will change over time as well. Like you'll look back and go, "Oh my God, like what was I doing?" But that's okay. I really think that that's okay, and even having some regrets, I think, might be okay. I'm sure all of us are going to be at some point in our life where we're not as strong as we want to be. We're maybe sick. We're maybe, at the end of our life. And I'm sure there's going to be a little regret of, oh man, I think I pushed it a little too far. Or, oh man, I wish I would have pushed it further. I think there's always going to be like those little things of self doubt in there. But I really like to party like now. I want like stuff to be fun now. I want to make money. I want to be strong. I want to be jacked. I want to be tan. I want to like, for me, that's like the stuff that's fun. And for each person, they can sort of pick their own stuff. But, even just like having like a business meeting or phone call and someone's like, oh, well, should we wait on, I'm always like, no, 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 we shouldn't wait on anything or anybody. Like, let's figure out a way, not in an unhealthy way, but let's figure out a way to just, how do we keep moving forward? How do we make sure these things happen?
Mark, I'm just curious in the early days, the powerlifting days, and I know there was a documentary on this, but I saw it, honestly, it was years ago. But like walk us through kind of like what your training looked like, as well as I'm super curious on the nutrition side, as well as like what you were taking and stacking up to get like that freaking massive. I'm just generally intrigued. I would imagine the caloric intake was massive, but I imagine your supplement cabinet was quite diverse. So could you just get into detail on what that life looked like at that time when you were kind of all in, just becoming an absolute monster?
I had the gym, super training gym, for uh like 15 years or so, and the gym was free, and part of the gym being free was like was part of my mission, like to get better. And I realized I needed like-minded people. My mentor, Louis Simmons, where I trained at Westside Barbell for over a year, Louis Simmons said, if you walk with the lame, you develop a limp. And so I knew that I needed to be around like-minded people that wanted to get better, that wanted to get stronger. And powerlifting is a thankless sport. There's really no money in it. And I didn't really care to try to get $75 a week from like 20 different people or whatever. Um, I was more like, I want to utilize these people to get as strong as possible. I'm going to learn a lot by teaching them a lot. I'm going to learn a lot by having the gym be free. And that's kind of all the payment that I need. It's going to help me to get stronger. And so I think, kind of holding on to that mentality of utilizing a group, utilizing a team to get better, to get stronger, was the key component, not so much the actual way that we trained. Because the way that you train is obviously huge, and the style of programming and stuff can be massive, but it's also really important to have like camaraderie. And I mentioned earlier, fun. Like we just had a lot of fun. It wasn't so much about competition every time. It wasn't always so much of like, I kind of famously would squat between 400 and 500 pounds all the time. And my training partners, just like, they didn't understand that. They were like, this is like, this is like 40 or 50% of your max. This doesn't make any sense. But I started to develop a skill of being able to get really good with the lighter weights, and to be able to mimic by using chains and using bands and utilizing some other sophisticated, I guess, like techniques, you would say. Uh, but I guess ultimately I was able to really get a stimulus without the annihilation. I think it's Lee Haney. He says, stimulate, don't annihilate. And I think that that's what I got really good at. Whereas a lot of my training partners, they really missed the boat a lot of times on working on their weaknesses. And I would kind of sit back and watch that. I had one of my lifters was really, really strong. He squatted 1160. He deadlifted 800. But I was ultimately able to beat him in head-to-head competition a couple times, and then also was able to beat him on the total because I just kind of observed him and watched kind of what he was doing. And I was very proud of the fact that as a coach, I didn't have the best bench. I didn't have the best squat. I didn't have the best deadlift in our gym. But as a power lifter, you get judged on your total. It's a combination of those three lifts. And I did have the best total. And I was able to do that just kind of by really observing and watching these guys, a couple of them not work on their weaknesses. And for me, I heard you mentioning off air that you need to strengthen your lower back. And yeah, one of the greatest exercises ever and one of the most dangerous exercises of all time is a good morning. A good morning is it's a great way to hurt yourself. And it's also a great way to build up your lower back. And so I would do a cambered bar good morning. That's a bar that's like really bent, and then you're able to put your kind of hands in like a different position. And I mean, there's tons of videos online of me doing that with 500 and 600 pounds. So like that's where I would really push the weight, and that's where some of my max effort work would come from. But my training in general was the conjugate system. It was the West Side barbell method. I did box squats. I did good mornings. I did speed deadlifts and speed bench press. And I was just obsessed with it. I really, really loved it. And I don't necessarily miss powerlifting, but I miss lifting that way. That particular way of lifting, I still revert back to it quite a bit because it just felt so good. If you guys were in town in Sacramento and we were lifting at the spot that we have now, we'd be squatting in a group, and it'd be like you would go, I would go, you would go, and so on. And we just keep going back and forth, and we'd do like 10 sets. And then after that, you would kind of do a bunch of assistance exercises. But the way that we trained, it just made so much sense, and it made all other types of training make sense. So what we did with the West Side method was you would have a main movement of the day, a main event, we called it. Based off of the main movement and based off of some of your weaknesses, that would automatically almost preset your assistance exercises. So you mentioning that you have a weak lower back. Well, maybe the first movement is, some type of deadlift. So we deadlift, and maybe we do like a deficit deadlift. That's just like an extra range of motion deadlift. Then maybe the next movement after that is like, okay, let's figure out a movement that's going to also probably address the lower back, which the deficit deadlift already kind of gets that. But maybe we have you do some sumo deficit deadlifts as well, just to get you to train from like a funky position. And then maybe there's some like 45-degree back raises. Okay, now we need like a hamstring movement in there. And, let's maybe finish off with some abs or something like that. And the workout's over. And then the same thing when you bench press and stuff like that. It's like, okay, bench is the main movement. What are the muscles that are involved in bench pressing? Shoulders, triceps. And you might say, shoulders for me, you might say triceps for you. And that's where you can kind of split off and do some slightly different things. Yeah, once I started doing that, I think the greatest article I've ever read is by Dave Tate. And it's called the Periodization Bible, Part 1 and 2. And it's probably like 30 pages of reading, but it's like the Matrix. Once you read that, if training doesn't make sense to you, all training will start to make a lot of sense to you after you read that.
Yeah, there's no, and of course you're at a level that I in no way can relate to, but if you're looking to get as strong as you possibly can, there is no system better for that than conjugate training, especially when you start to realize that you're doing zero speed work, and then you do that, and after 4 weeks, you're like, holy shit, like band work, chain work. It really is, even as a skinny, lanky guy, like your numbers, like your baseline numbers, what you can get them to if you run a true 12-week conjugate program, it will absolutely, I mean, I've watched it myself. I've watched it in plenty of other people. Like Lynn Panko he's a monster at it. So yeah, it's unbelievable what you can do when you follow a system like that, that really, like you said, it connects the dots on different styles of training and puts them into one system that really allows you to push your body in a strength capacity that is hard to find in other programs.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. Mark, I'm curious, like paired with that though, on the just supplements and we'll categorize it as supplements with quotes. Like what were you all taking to allow yourself to push it even further? Obviously that has a huge component into this. I'm just generally curious.
Yeah, I wanted to just add on to like one of the cool things about the West Side method, if you get it right and you don't sort of like overdo it, which is like most programs, but if you don't overdo it, you'll actually just feel really strong. And I think like that is a substantial thing. I remember like the first year or so that I did it, like just my back, my hamstrings, they just felt strong. And before I gained all the weight and stuff, I felt like explosive. I felt like an athlete. And you're seeing more and more of that now. You're seeing like there's so much more athleticism in the gym, and you're seeing more people getting a little smarter about like not everything is just like in the gym, and even the stuff that's in the gym is stuff that you could do out of the gym, because I think that we're starting to get smart to the fact that like if you basically just like lift weights all the time and that's the only thing that you do and you don't participate in sports anymore, you're going to probably get your body to be pretty stiff and pretty tight. But to kind of answer your question on supplements and stuff like that, I think the main thing is food, and then everything sort of trickles down from there. You have to consume um, you have to consume like the right nutrients, And so for me, even back then, was pretty cognizant of nutrition, pretty cognizant of eating a lot of protein. Um, Even though there's some videos where I'm 330 and I'm pretty bloated and pretty fat. There's also some videos and stuff like that of me like at like 280, 290 and still having like some traceable ab muscles going on. So um, yeah, that took just like a lot of diligence, a lot of time, a lot of eating. And I remember, there was many days where I would eat basically pretty perfectly throughout the day, with just, complex carbohydrates and proteins and stuff like that. Not too much worry about the fats at that point, because, that's more of like a bodybuilding style diet where you'd rein in the fats a little bit. But what I would do is I'd basically just weigh myself every day and just see like, is this trending upward? And if it wasn't, then I needed more food. And so that's where at night I could have a little bit more freedom with the food. I could have some pizza, I could have some fast food, I could have some ice cream. And it was kind of the fun and the beauty of powerlifting is that it's not it's not, you're not trying to be a runway model. You got to be pretty big and thick to be able to lift the weights. And even the first powerlifting meet I ever went to, I remember this guy that I looked up to that was quite a bit older than me. I was probably like 15 or something, and this guy's probably 30. And he was massive, and he gets in the front seat of our car, and we're on our way to this powerlifting meet. He's like, "All right, boys." He's like, "I brought a whole thing of sticky buns." He's like, we got to get through this before we get to the competition. It was like, a big ass thing of like, there was like, I don't know, 8 sticky buns in there, and there's only 3 of us. Just make you feel terrible, but that's kind of like the fun part of powerlifting is you get to fluff up a little bit. I remember even thinking then, I'm like, this is the sport for me. If you get to eat like this is kind of cool. And then in terms of like actual supplements, like I'm a fan of supplements. I've been supplementing, uh, magnesium and vitamin D and like all this stuff for many, many years. And then it kind of comes and goes. I'm like, I don't know. Vitamin D is a hormone. Maybe I should just go get it from the sun. So probably a lot like you guys, I experiment a lot and I try to figure out like what makes sense to me at the time. I've always loved amino acids. So still to this day, I have EAAs. Protein shakes. I've been having 2 protein shakes every day, probably pretty much since I was like 14 or 15, even when the protein shakes were gross. And then obviously, in powerlifting and bodybuilding, it's kind of an interesting thing that no one really cares that much about the PEDs. It's not like no one's pissed about it. It's just like people just do their thing, and they show up to their competition. And there are tested powerlifting federations, and then there's untested powerlifting federations. And the same thing is true with bodybuilding. And, the strongman guys that you see, the pro strongman guys, that's an untested organization as well. And those guys are, massive. They're 6'8" and 400 pounds and so on. And so performance enhancing drugs, I mean, they work. They help a lot. I never really understood so I guess I do understand that if somebody is in a sport and the sport has testing for it, and you're trying to pretend that you're, natural, then that's kind of shitty, because you're not like really playing under the same rules as everybody else. But if you're in powerlifting or bodybuilding, or even if you're just someone on the internet, I don't really think it matters that much. Like if you're taking, I don't take exception to it. I just think it's each individual's choice sort of on what they want to do. I do think that it's not a great idea for people to lie, for someone like the Liver King, like that particular situation of saying like, he wasn't necessarily saying it, but he was alluding to the fact that he, sort of did this stuff naturally, and that the liver and kidneys and stuff that he was eating was giving him, some of the results. So like that kind of stuff, that's not great. But in general, I think that performance enhancing drugs are just a technology, just like ChatGPT is a technology. We may as well get on board with it. We can get as mad as we want about Snapchat or Instagram or what's going on social media, or we can, just have our own interpretation of it and utilize it to our advantage. The internet can be a weird and dangerous place, but it's also great. Like I've made millions of dollars off of I don't know, people are going to send me a check in the mail for Slingshot. I'd rather do it the way we're doing it now with Apple Pay and all the other quick, easy, convenient things that we have. So, just my main take on performance enhancing drugs is that I think they're amazing. And I think that they can be taken in reasonable ways to get people to places that they want to go to, just like really any other drug, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, really, no matter what the LSD or mushrooms, whatever the drug is, you're taking the drug because the drug can like transport you or get you somewhere that you otherwise sort of don't know how to get to. Like you can feel great and have a good time and be social without alcohol, right? But it's kind of more fun if you have alcohol. And then you're seeing more people now, they're trying to find like alternatives to alcohol, and you got like kava and kratom and Zen pouches and this and that. But even your pre-workout that you take, you can go in the gym and work out, and you could probably go out for a walk and get some sunlight, and you could probably listen to some good music and get yourself hyped up for a workout. But it's nice to have it like a little can that you can just shoot down before you go and do your training session. So, anybody like looking into doing that kind of stuff, it's just do your research. There's so much information everywhere. There's a lot of great resources. Vigorous Steve is a guy that talks a lot about performance enhancing drugs and has a lot of just really like incredible information. And there's a bunch of other guys out there. So I think if you are ever, rather than like tell people don't take them, they're not safe. If you are going to take them, know what you're taking. And also the last point I'll make on that is that, I didn't do anything until I was 25. 25 is still pretty young, but I would say like, I don't think it's for kids. I don't think if you're 18 and you're like, man, I'm skinny, I'm small, like go get your gains, go train and eat your steak and drink your whole milk and kind of see where some of those results get you for a little while. Cause I think that foundation and the fundamentals, I think, are still really important. You can't skip over them.
Absolutely. When you were in your peak of, on gear, moving the big weight, what did your stack look like? And I'm just curious, and because that had to be a huge part of, obviously you have your training, your nutrition, but to be moving, 11 to 1080 on a squat, obviously you're on some major gear, as everyone else was. So I'm just curious, what did that look like?
Yeah, you got to kind of, the same thing happens in bodybuilding too. You got to just figure out a way to get a good amount of like drugs in your system. And unfortunately, you're injecting stuff. And so that doesn't come without some pain. But we used to basically say that if it's not full, it's empty. And that was referring to the syringe. And there's three mLs of oil and steroids in there basically. But I utilized a lot of testosterone over the years. I utilized testosterone in fairly high amounts. I would say probably get close to like a gram of testosterone a week. And one of the weird things about steroids is that you can only get so much from each one. And so that's where the stacks come in. That's where people are like, oh, well, if I stack this with this, that will help a lot, because then you're getting most of the benefits from something without as much of the negative side effects. I've used Trenbolone, I've used Equipoise, I've used Deca, and then there's oral steroids, there's Dianabol and Anadrol and all these different things. But I would say that, I would be on probably like 2 grams of stuff like per week. It might be, 1,000, it might be close to 1,000 milligrams of test, might be 500 or so of Deca or Equipoise, something like that. And there might be some orals thrown in there too, because why not? But oral steroids are really strong, and they're really powerful. And unfortunately, the one of the issues with those is they're so powerful is that it makes it very easy to tear a muscle. And the other steroids are powerful too, but the oral steroids are like, they just have like an instant impact on you. And I think you end up getting like too big and too strong, too fast. And like the rest of the body's not really ready for it. I also think there's probably some inflammation and stuff like that goes on, especially when I look back at the way I was doing it. And the only really smart thing I did with that is like after competitions, I would come off of everything. I'd also get my nutrition more on point and do like a keto diet, lose a bunch of weight, and then sort of like rebuild from there. So that was actually pretty smart, because I would get rid of a lot of that inflammation. But the main stack was usually just Test, Deca, and D-ball.
So Trend, for those that don't know, there is a hilarious, it's worth checking out. There are several Reddit threads that if you read through people's trend stories, that will make you die laughing. My brother and I sat and did it for like 2 hours the one day drinking beers, and we were on the floor laughing because it seems to have a unique effect that even the other ones don't have, at least in some individuals. Do you have any insight there? Did you feel any strangeness when taking Trend? Because people's stories are hilarious of what they experienced when on a cycle.
Yeah, is that fact or fiction?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Trenbolone is unique. It's so like, I think there's a book out there. I forget which one it is, but like there's like anabolic reference guide or something. It's a big old textbook, and it has all these like ratings, of how anabolic and androgenic some of these drugs are. And testosterone gets like 100 for both or something like that, and it just lists out these other drugs. But then you flip to the page that has Trenbolone on it, and it's like 500. It's like off the charts. Trenbolone, interestingly enough, is when it's in a bottle, it's very, very yellow. It just has like a weird, you're like, that's odd. It's like, it's I mean, it looks dangerous, and it can be. I think, when people start to, the issue always is dosing, right? Like, I think that we know that like THC and mushrooms and stuff like that, it's probably just like people having a good time for the most part, and even some alcohol here and there. It sounds like just people having a little bit of fun, but it's really easy to overdo it. It's easy to get addicted to stuff. Another interesting thing with Trenbolone is when you take a shot of it, it can give you a coughing fit. So that is like a really weird thing, because you're like, well, what's the mechanism behind that? And nobody knows either. No one has any idea. It'll just be like you're walking down the street and you get like, some pollen or something, or you swallowed a bug or something. You can't get anything to get that out of there. But at least in that case, at least there's actually something that like that is going to probably clear at some point. But with trenbolone, that happens, and then you just you feel like you're gonna like cough and choke so much you just like blow your own head off. So it definitely has some weird and unique properties, but it makes you really strong. It makes you really muscular looking. Bodybuilders use it a lot of times as they get closer to their contest prep. Powerlifters love it because it makes them really strong. Then you also run into that same issue where it makes you strong really fast, and so you have to be cautious that you don't blow off a muscle. I don't have any particular like trend stories, but just from what I do know about, I've taken it before, but I don't have the same experience as everybody else most of the time because I'm very calm. I'm just like it's something I've also like worked on over the years, having balance and equanimity, and just a huge fan of like really trying to like keep my stress levels like part of the reason why I don't have email, and part of the reason why I don't ever really use a computer other than this special occasion doing this podcast with you guys. But I like to keep the stress levels real mild, and so even when I have taken performance enhancing drugs, there was never a time where they really moved me too much one way or the other. However, when you're working out, they can feel awesome. At least that's been my experience. So like when you're working out and you kind of need that little extra, someone just cheers you on. So, a friend just encouragement, say, let's go or something. And you're in the middle of a set and it gets you to go a little deeper into the set. You were going to do 8 reps. And now you got 12. Well, to me, that's what steroids feel like. It feels like there's that little push in the back of your head. And I think one thing that you don't really hear talked about that much is I think they can be really motivating, especially testosterone, especially if somebody's going from having low or non-optimal testosterone levels to having more optimal testosterone levels. That could really help. But yeah, trend can make you irritable. It can mess with your sleep, and it can make you like extra sweaty. But I don't know. I was 330 pounds, so I was going to be extra sweaty no matter what, probably.
Love it.
Mark, I would love, and I know we got a couple minutes left, but I would love for you to just give we always like to give like practical takeaways for the listeners. And for you as somebody who's, and you called them technologies earlier, but just always been in the supplement space, unafraid to like kind of test new things, both physically and as far as your diet and supplements. What are some practical takeaways? And I think first, like, could be just like, if you have money, like, so no restrictions on budget, like what are some things from an everyday, either supplementation or just like lifestyle that you would recommend on kind of a mass scale? And then what are some like budget friendly ones, maybe that some takeaways that, yeah, these don't require $8,000 to do, but they are needle movers as far as how you look and feel on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'll even add, not even just supplements, injectables, peptides, whatever. For someone that has the budget to work with, obviously these are things that are evolving pretty fast. So I'd like to know, kind of include those in there as well with that question.
So I got like a couple things sitting around me over here. I have some red glasses. I got some yellow glasses.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of like just some, interestingly enough, with the unnatural stuff, I'm also a huge fan of like nature and the natural things that we have available to us. And also maybe protecting ourselves, even though I like technology and I'm a fan of it, I think it's important that we sort of protect ourselves from it. I'm sponsored by a company called NADS. It's an underwear company, and it's just cotton underwear basically, because there's microplastics and there's all kinds of shit in these like spandex polyester materials, and I'm just trying to distance myself from more stuff like that as I learn more. These are things that I was more unaware of years ago, but every morning I go outside and I use these ropes. I got these they're all tangled up. I got these ropes. These are for rope flow. This is like this giant rope. It almost looks like a giant like hose. And uh, I have some different versions of that, like lighter ones, heavier ones. And I'll just go out and I'll twirl them around, and I'm grounding at the same time. I'm also getting sunlight. I try to pop out the best I can every morning and see the sun coming up. So I think there's little stuff that people can do that will have a huge impact over time. And the information on grounding is a little like, yeah, I don't really know. But I'm a big believer in like, what happens if I do this for a long time? What happens if I get in 3 minutes here, 3 minutes there, and I do that for the next 20 years? What's that going to result in? And so, years ago, I also started walking. I think walking is huge. I don't really know a reason why anyone wouldn't get benefits from walking. It's awesome. So I don't, if you're an athlete, if you're a lifter, a couple 10-minute walks per day, I think can be really useful. They've been shown to help regulate glucose levels, and it could be something that could help with like nutrient partitioning, taking the calories and the nutrient consuming and just sort of, quote unquote, putting them in the right spot. I am a fan of like just getting sunlight, period. I think the sun is really powerful. I think that we should try to get a solar callus. We should try to, everyone has different skin type. And so what we see happen in the summer a lot of times is the UV index is 9 or 10, and then everybody runs out and they go and try to like lay out in the sun. And that's not really the way that you want to handle that. You want to try to get sunlight throughout the entire year. And obviously it's not always that available. The UV index is low, right? But the UV index goes low and it starts to creep up. And over time, it will go here in California, it will go from it being like a 5 or 6 during the winter. And then it will start to creep up to 7, 8, 9, 10. And you want to build a solar callus over time, get yourself used to the sun. And if you listen to any of the stuff from like Dr. Jack Cruz, and there's a couple other people beating the drum pretty hard. There's some people, talk about circadian rhythm and your eating and your circadian rhythm kind of matching up. And they talk about the timing. They talk about how you can handle glucose better in the morning. But I don't think that's like I don't think that's some sort of just like internal clock of a human. I think it has to do with the light. And so, go out, get the morning sunlight, get that dopamine going, get your body kind of, just the way I like to look at it is just sort of heading in the right direction. A lot of people like to have coffee. I had to have coffee this morning, but again, just learning more stuff. I switched to decaf about a year ago. That's had a pretty good impact. I am a fan of caffeine, but I'd rather use it more sparingly and use it when I think I need it. Whereas before, I wasn't ever really thinking about it before. I just like wake up and just have coffee, and I should be pretty well rested and I should be fine. And I shouldn't need a cup of coffee. And so I started kind of like looking into stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, why am I? Okay, that's just a weird habit. So let me, change that up, and just made some tweaks. And then start kind of like running down a list of some other stuff. I think one of the best investments that a lot of people can make is in their footwear, is in their shoes. A lot of people probably see me recently like running around in sandals. Those sandals, you can purchase those off my website if you want, or at markbellslingshot.com. They're a sandal that I made with a company called Shama. But I think that our footwear is like critical. I think people are having all kinds of injuries and all kinds of not just their feet. It's the feet. The feet is like where some stuff manifests. People have plantar fasciitis and they'll have all these other things. But if you look at guys that are like my age, I'm 47 years old, and you'll see them, kind of walking around their New Balance or in their Hokas, and people are just putting more and more padding underneath their shoes. And then people are like bundling up more. They're putting like more clothes on. And you just see those people, they're just getting sicker and sicker. In many cases, they're gaining body fat. They're losing muscle mass year in, year out. they obviously are not, paying attention to their nutrition and their diet. But I think that all these things, they all work in conjunction together. They all work in like a rhythm. And when you have your sunlight right, and when you have your light environment situated, that's one of the reasons to wear the blue blocker glasses. Is it's really important not only that we get sunlight, but we also maybe deflect some of the blue light that we're getting, because when you're indoors and you're getting blue light, that blue light is exponentially way stronger than the blue light that you're getting even like in the middle of the day from the sun. And it's direct and it's only blue. Like there might be some other light in there too, but it's primarily just blue light. And so I started kind of viewing blue light as being like junk food. And so I just am trying to limit. I don't always wear the glasses, just because, like, if I pop on here like this, everyone's like, oh great, one of these fucking guys again, right? and so and so I choose it sparingly. But right now I have a window open over here, and the sunlight's coming through. So I'm like, okay, I got like I just try to be cognizant of all these things. But I think that all these things work in conjunction. And for people that are struggling with their diet and their nutrition, you'll be really shocked if you start to get your walks in. You start to practice maybe a little bit of grounding. You walk not just on a treadmill, but you walk outside, get some sunlight. You're going to find that your diet is going to get easier and easier and easier over time. And your perception and your perspective of your diet is going to change massively. I mean, you guys probably remember this when you started learning about nutrition. You're like, I got to cut out everything that's fun. Like, really? That sucks. But now you probably don't think of it that way at all. Now you're like, oh my God, like this is so great. I get to eat another piece of steak or another piece of fish or another. You're excited about the foods that you have that are nutritious, that are healthy. I think previously a lot of people think that if they switch to health or switch over to a healthier diet, that they're cutting out a lot of flavor. But everything that I eat, every meal that I have, there might be some exceptions on some days, and there might be some exceptions for a particular point in time where I'm trying to get leaner or something like that, where I don't enjoy the hell out of every single thing that I eat. But for the most part, I love everything that I eat, and it's great. So I think investing in your food is a huge one too. Some people are like, "Oh man, that's expensive." And I realize, yeah, it's expensive. There's inflation, like prices are going up, and getting good grass-fed, grass-finished beef and all that stuff, it's very pricey. Um, but it's also an investment. And I've even shared with some people that I've helped. I've helped a lot of people lose a lot of weight over the years. And sometimes I tell people, hey man, just go through your pantry and just put everything in a garbage bag and just throw it out. And they're like, that's too wasteful. And, I guess if you wanted to, you could bring it to a shelter or something like that. But the way I look at it is, it was a waste when you bought it, so you already wasted your time and your money by purchasing it in the first place. And you start to have a different perspective on your food, and you start to see your food as your food is time. Is this food going to is this food going to force me or make me spend a lot of time in the gym because I got to like work it off? Is this food going to make me have to, run an extra 45 minutes every week? Or is this food going to be productive and it's going to help me with the outputs that I want for my, day to day? I guess like when it comes to like, not having a budget and like being able to afford whatever, cold plunge is great. Cold plunges are awesome. I think cold therapy, it will come and go. I'm sure, like, you probably won't see as much of it next year, but I think that cold thermogenesis and cold therapy are really important. I don't necessarily believe that you need to get into a cold plunge as often as people think, although I do think it's a good practice, especially for mental health. I think it can be great for some people. But just going outside and not having your shirt on when it's kind of chilly out and you getting goosebumps is said to have a pretty good impact. So it could be like 60 degrees, and you could still get pretty good effects. Or it could even be like 30 degrees, and you just are you're just going to maybe go for 3 minutes or so with just less stuff on. Maybe you pull off your hoodie or whatever, but you still have a t-shirt on, and you walk for 3 minutes that way just to get yourself some of that cold exposure. Because I think the cold and the sunlight, they just do so many powerful things for our mitochondria and for our system in general that it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of those things since they're just so easy. Red light therapy can be kind of cool, but like if you don't have to plug that bad boy into like a powerful setup, then it's probably not going to do much. So you might want to do some research on that and try to look into red light therapies that are powerful, and those are going to be super expensive. I have one that's called the EMR Tech, and it's an expensive product. It's like 25K or whatever, but in the winter time, it's pretty cool for me because I get to just throw that thing on. I have a recovery room where I have a cold plunge. I have the red light therapy. But again, I don't think I get so much out of just literally just going outside. Even though I have the convenience of using these other devices and these other things that are right here, I choose not to do that much. I'd rather actually just go outside and get the elements from the earth and from the sun. The sun's so powerful, you're not going to like be able to mimic anything close to the sun in your, like in the comfort of your own home. Lastly, when it comes to like peptides and stuff, there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's even like the GLP-1, all that stuff, like the Ozempics and stuff like that. Those are considered peptides. I haven't really found peptides to be like crazy useful. When you're somebody that has utilized steroids, it's kind of hard to it's hard to be excited about some of these other things. They work so minimally in comparison. If someone who's working out regularly just kind of out of nowhere starts to take 400 milligrams of testosterone, you're going to go, oh my God, holy shit, But if somebody started taking like a peptide like MOTS-C or something like that, or started injecting L-carnitine, it's not going to blow you away. You're not going to notice it much. It still may have a really positive impact for the person. And I utilize some of these things. I'll utilize carnitine sometimes before a run. I want to be careful with the suggestions just because I don't know what these things do. You know what I mean? But for me, I research them enough, and I'm around friends that know enough about them where I'll ask them, say, hey, you know what? Like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I'll dabble and play around with different stuff, but like even BPC 157, TB 500, they kind of consider that sort of like the Wolverine peptide. It's supposed to help recovery a lot. And I've had a little success with that. I've injected it into my hamstring before. My hamstring was getting a little weird when I was doing some sprints and stuff. And I don't know if it was directly, from the BPC 157 or if it was just like time that fixed that, but it got better. So maybe it was something that helped a lot. I'm trying to think of some other peptides that move the needle. I'll occasionally utilize like growth hormone, but growth hormone just seems so minimal to me in comparison. I've used insulin before, and insulin is really powerful. But that's one, like, you better know your dosages, and you better have your carbohydrates around, because you can die from improper usage of insulin. So there is another one. There's one called DADA and DADA, and that's one that I'll sometimes use before a run. And that I don't have the greatest understanding of it, but I do believe it's supposed to help with like the Krebs cycle. It's supposed to help the Krebs cycle, like almost basically not stop or slow down, and so it's supposed to give you a little extra oomph when you're exercising. So it'd be good for like CrossFit. It'd be good for running, those types of things. So yeah, I love all the stuff. I love all the technologies, and it's kind of hard to keep up, really. There's so many different drugs out there that are popping up all the time. I would say this is that, like, there's really testosterone, or getting with a TRT company or any of these things. None of these things are going to really do for you. They're not going to do anything for you in comparison to what you can do for yourself. So the things you do to yourself are cool, but the things you do for yourself are just exponentially way more important. So you get your lifting in check, you get your nutrition in check, you get your sleep in check. Those are just really important fundamentals. And then some sunlight, some cold therapy. When it's later in the evening, start wearing the weird glasses and start paying attention to, like, your light environment. I don't use any overhead lights anymore in my house unless I really need to see something, but I just usually have them off. I'll have a light on in a different room because your melatonin in your body doesn't get released as well unless you see dark as well. So that's why that's so important. So you could be getting your morning sunlight thinking that you're helping to regulate your circadian rhythm, and you could be kind of fouling it up later on in the day by exposing yourself to too much blue light, watching TV, and not getting the dark environment that we need to basically go to bed. So, and there's a lot of healthy habits that you can work your way towards, but those are some of the ones I think are the most important.
I just want to say I appreciate the perspective, because and I've interjected this several times on the podcast, but I'm in full support of the technology, the supplementation, and all that as well. But what makes me laugh at times is that people don't realize the technology they have in their own body and then within nature. And I love that you kind of like, hey, I'll dabble in both worlds, but people want to out biohack something that's already extremely beautiful, complex, and I would say more intricate than anything you're going to put into your body. They just want something to fix it. And it's like, well, wait a second, why don't you get that thing turning, because that thing is beautiful and has unbelievable capabilities that you haven't even tapped into yet. Then, of course, add on some adjunct stuff if you're still not achieving what you want. But what I love is that you said is that as I think you said it starts to open your perspective, and you were talking specifically to food, but all the things you're describing, the light exposure, the grounding, the food, I would say, like, the ability to quiet your mind, limit technology exposure. You can't, like, the person you are now, when you think you need to add some complex like supplement or technology, if you check those boxes, as you said, all of a sudden you realize that anxiety and that need for all these other things, it kind of falls away. And you realize, like, whoa, there's an innate ability for my body to just feel good and feel relaxed and feel calm. Like, holy shit. And when people have that realization, it's like, yeah, you didn't need to spend $2,000 a month on supplements. You just needed to do things that are more innate to our natural human biology to feel the way you wanted. But I see people in that Chinese finger trap all the time of, like, continuing trying to add things when in reality they actually need to remove more things to get back to just a base level of human nature.
Have you guys ever heard of deuterium depleted water?
No.
So deuterium depleted water is like a specific type of water that some people sell it. You can kind of like look it up. But the human body makes it. And guess what? The human body makes it when the human body will make it probably for various reasons, but it will make more deuterium depleted water, and your body will be depleted of deuterium, which you can read up more about that. And the reasons why that's important, but it's via like a carnivore diet or a low carb diet. Your body will tend to make more of that water. I guess like maybe in the presence of carbohydrates and stuff, it won't make it as much water. And fruits and stuff like that, they have deuterium in them. But it's just like fascinating. To me, like that stuff just like it blows my mind that you can get your body to produce its own water. And some people have even talked about how like you really shouldn't drink that much water. And that blows my mind, because when I was a kid growing up, you never saw anybody with a water bottle. Like no one ever had. There was no, think about how weird that is. There was no water bottles. Like, I'm not even talking about that. It wasn't like people didn't travel around with their own like little flask or shaker cup or whatever you want to call it of water. There was no water bottles at all. There was like no one had a plastic. There wasn't a company that served bottled water. And it just shows you like how things change so quickly. I think I'm not saying that we don't need water, but I find it to be interesting. We went on for many, many years without so much access to just being able to pound water every day. I had a guest on my show at some point say like, yeah, I think we're addicted to water. We drink way too much of it. And I was like, I thought about that for a little while. I mean, yeah, there was no water bottles when I was a kid. Like, people drank from a water fountain occasionally, and that was about it.
And it's happening with, and I think Bear takes him, so no offense, Bear, but it's happening with, I'm watching it happen with the electrolyte industry too. There are particular uses for electrolytes, but now people are having 3 packs a day sitting in an office for 8 hours. And it's like, guys, you do not need that much because there's other ingredients in there too. And some are better than others, but it's like, I'm watching that corporate capture happen right now to surrounding people thinking they need to just be pounding electrolytes all day, doing minimal exercise.
I agree. I love all that stuff too. And I was on the forefront of a lot of that. Years ago, Stan Efferding was trying to break an all-time world record. And he was in the middle of a powerlifting meet, and he was going to go to the hospital, like in the middle of this contest. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? He's like about ready to drive away. And his wife was going to drive him to the hospital because he was cramping up so much. And so I had him, I said, dude, let's put in your numbers for the next lift. He got done with his squats and he was going to bench. He's like, no, man. He's like, I can't do it. My hamstrings are cramping. Everything's cramping. He's like, I'm going to tear something. I'm going to get hurt. I said, let's just get you some water and get you some salt, and like, we'll see where you're at. This is like 8 years ago. And so he comes back in. I give him some Noon tablets. That's kind of all they had at the time. And I also just threw some salt in his water. And then next thing you know, he's feeling a little bit better. His color kind of comes back in his face and everything. And he warms up for bench. And he goes out there and benches 606. And then he deadlifts like 840 or 832 and breaks the all-time world record in the 275-pound weight class. And then Stan and I did an article in Power magazine about his experience with like electrolytes, and he went on to kind of like share that story with a lot of people. And then it wasn't too much longer after that Rob Wolf, Tyler Cartwright, and a couple other people came out with Element, which is really cool to see that company blow up so much. I think they're like in grocery stores and gas stations and stuff now with a RTD, like a pre-mixed drink that's
saw that,
like sparkling water and stuff like that. But from what they told me years ago, they were inspired by that article. So I was like, damn, that's freaking awesome. But yeah, man, I'm with you guys. I drink the hell out of it. I make my own hydration packets from my company Within You brand, and I drink way too many of those. Even though I am super active, it's like I definitely know that I don't need to have 5 or 6 of them in a day.
Mark, we really appreciate it. We know you're a busy guy. Thank you for sharing some of that insight. I know there's so much more we didn't cover, particularly your entrepreneurial journey that has been equally as impressive. So maybe we'll save that for another day. But for a couple meatheads, this was really cool to get you on and get a peek behind the curtain of how you got to where you've gotten, particularly on the powerlifting side. Is absolutely fascinating for those that lift weights.
Awesome. Yeah. And let me know an address where I can ship some product to, and you guys can try out some steak shakes and stuff.
Love it. And likewise, if you need some gear, let us know. I'd be happy to make that happen for you guys.
Great.
Awesome. Well, have a good day, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, guys.